Hi there everybody, we have a double dose of David today because we have even more information about the Final Fantasy Tactics remaster coming out. This is an article from Inverse and it says the Ivalice Chronicles director would love to do a Tactics Advance next or even a sequel to Final Fantasy Tactics, and I do want to tell you all about that today, and I definitely do think that's worth the sub as you come and you join my party and you level on up with me. Thank you so much for your sub, your hype, and your like. Yeah, now you can hype up videos and share them with the world and put them on the leaderboard, so thank you so much for that. It's a really cool new feature, and I can't wait to see it in use. So this is a pretty extensive article. It goes over a lot of things, but I just want to hit the high points. Mostly, I want to talk about, the stuff that interests me. That's the sequel, because, oh my gosh, like, a sequel or ports of Advance or sequels to Advance or remakes of Advance, that sort of stuff. It is fascinating. It's kind of tucked away at the end of this interview, so I'm going to skip to the end of the interview because I want to get to the good stuff. The question is, oh, and by the way, this is directly from the directors and the art director of Final Fantasy Tactics, and again, it is from Inverse, so we have two people answering these questions, and it says, with Tactics coming back, there are two other games in the Tactics series that are trapped on their original systems. Would you be interested in revisiting Tactics Advance and Advance 2? And if so, would you consider a similar art style to the Ivalice Chronicles? So they go ahead and they start answering it, and Mahiro says, once you get into it and you start playing these games, you really see how fun they are, but then you take a step back and you find out that it's a bit more of a niche genre overall. He's saying in comparison to turn-based RPGs, in comparison to action RPGs, and especially in comparison to, more mainstream things like, I don't know, sports or platformers or first-person shooters or things like that. So he goes on to say, if the Ivalice Chronicles can do well, that's good for the fans and they can enjoy it. But at the same time, it shows the business viability of the strategy RPG genre. And this isn't the first time that Square Enix has come out and said, hey, we're using this game to test the waters of the viability of this genre. If this game does well, we will come out with more strategy RPGs. They said this before in previous interviews, and now they're saying it again. Something tells me that Diofield Chronicle was kind of like, it was a real-time strategy game, and it also came out with 50 billion other games at the same time. Same thing with the Tactics Ogre remake. Came out right around the Diofield Chronicle, 50 billion other games, and it wasn't like, and Tactics Ogre is good, don't get me wrong, but it's not Final Fantasy Tactics, you know what I mean? It doesn't have that pedigree of Final Fantasy Tactics behind it. So they're really using this game to test the waters, not only for a sequel to Final Fantasy Tactics, to ports of Advance, but also just to making more strategy RPGs in general. So they say, if this proves the business viability of the strategy RPG genre, that could potentially open up the door for doing something similar with Final Fantasy Tactics Advance or Advance 2, and maybe even sequels and new titles as well. So yeah, we might be getting a Final Fantasy Tactics 2, we might be getting a brand new title as well, maybe something set in the Ivalice universe. I think that I speak for everyone who's worked in the original Final Fantasy Tactics and is working on the Ivalice Chronicles as well, that we would really like to see that happen. Then Minagawa goes on to answer the question as well and says, whenever it comes to the other titles, for example Advance, I feel as though my role was pulled back a little bit in terms of the scope. So it feels like if I were to say that this is what I want to do, I don't think that it's something that I'd be able to give an answer to until we actually try it out. But then, even in terms of story in Tactics Advance, the central component of that is different from what you see in Tactics. So even if we were to use a similar pixel-based aesthetic, the approach would be one where it's a little bit more delicate, maybe like a pop art. So he's talking about the art style. They're not going to be doing HD 2D with these games. They broached that topic earlier in the interview. They said that they wanted to keep this kind of in its own Ivalice universe and use the same kind of art style and keep it very authentic to the original versions. And they're saying with Advance and Advance 2, they might do something like a pop art thing, which reminds me of something like maybe Tweenie, something like that, which would be really interesting. The Tactics Advance games, like, they're a whole other beast from Final Fantasy Tactics. They're completely different. It takes a lot of Final Fantasy 12 sort of stuff with like the Viera and the Banga and the Moogle. So you have different races, and each race can equip or use different job classes. So here, pretty much everybody's a human for the most part, and all the humans can use all the different job classes. And there, it's like the Moogles excel at the magical-based job classes. The Banga excel at like the physical-based job classes. The Viera is kind of a mixture between the two archers and mages and things like that. So it is a pretty interesting thing right there. And then they go on to say, one of the big topics in video games this year has been a resurgence of the turn-based games. Yeah, I talked about this in my panel at PAX West, actually, how the future's looking really bright for turn-based RPGs. We're seeing a resurgence, we're seeing a renaissance of them, not only with new IPs coming out, but with remasters of all these old games, Lunar, Suikoden, you know, just to name a couple right there. But we're seeing really a resurgence of these turn-based games right there, so that's really cool. So Mahiro goes on to answer this and says, with the different hardware advances that have come lately, we've seen a lot more action games. But I think at the same time, that doesn't really mean that turn-based or strategy games went away. They've advanced with the hardware advances. I know that we have titles that might start with P or have 33 in them, and our fans really enjoyed these games. I know what he's talking about here with 33, like duh, Expedition 33, but I know we have titles that might start with P. I have no idea what he's talking about. If anybody knows the titles that might start with P that he's referring to, please let me know, because I am at a loss with that one. And he says, but strategy RPGs are opportunities where people need to be able to think and strategize to excel at these games, and people do enjoy them overall, so these games do have a place. And then one more thing that I do want to talk about is some combat changes and some gameplay changes that they go over here in regards to Cloud. He talked about how they're going to make Cloud a little bit more accessible. He says, truth be told, with the original version, Cloud came to your party very late. He started at level 1, and you didn't have the materia blade to use, so he's pretty difficult to utilize as a character. So in Ivalice Chronicles, we made it so that his stats are adjusted quite a bit. On top of that, he will come equipped with the materia blade whenever he joins your party initially. So he's much more approachable than he was in the universe, or in the original version of the game. And on top of that, the timing at which you get Cloud is going to be the timing at which you could get him in the War of the Lions version. So they're including that War of the Lions edition, but they're not including other War of the Lions editions? I don't know. So from that perspective, he'll be a lot more useful, and he is fully voice acted as with the other characters. And then the one last high point that I do want to talk about is combat balance. He says that we didn't make any major overhauls or changes, they only made small tweaks. Like, for example, some abilities that may have been hard to use. I believe that he was referring to the Archer job class right there. Then he says, you mentioned the Door to Trade City fight and the infamous Y-Graph fight. But in terms of the base design for those, we haven't changed that, but we have introduced difficulty modes to compensate for those harder boss fights. On top of that, we have the ability to retry a battle, and whenever you're doing consecutive battles, you can actually back out to the world map to, you know, grind or buy new equipment or things like that for accessibility reasons. So fascinating interview. I am loath to come to y'all twice in a day, but I did it yesterday, and I'm doing it again today because this is just really fascinating news. I just had to share it with y'all. So now I want to hear from y'all. What do you think about this? Do you think that we're going to be getting Tactics 2? Do you think we're going to be getting advanced ports? Do you think that Tactics will sell well? I think that it's going to sell like hotcakes myself. But now I want to hear from y'all. Let me know in the comments, and have a good day.